Someone applied for a job at your company recently. Their resume was perfect. Their GitHub had 3 years of commits. Their portfolio site had client testimonials. They aced the technical screening. The face you saw on that video call, it was not a face. It was software. Running on a 5-year-old laptop. Built in 70 minutes by someone with no prior experience in image manipulation. Right now, inside companies across America, aerospace manufacturers, television networks, Silicon Valley tech firms, federal contractors, there are employees whose salaries are being wired, every 2 weeks, directly to Kim Jong Un's nuclear weapons program. They write clean code, they show up to stand-up meetings, they file their timesheets on time, and the woman who built the infrastructure that made all of it possible lived in a quiet suburb of Phoenix, Arizona, with 90 laptops stacked on shelves in her spare room. This is not a story about a distant threat. This is a story about the last resume your company opened. Before we get into how this works, you need to understand what kind of story this actually is. Because every version of this story you have seen focuses on North Korea, on Kim Jong Un, on sanctions and geopolitics and state-sponsored hacking, and all of that is true, but it misses the thing that makes this genuinely different from every other cybercrime story. This operation did not require a single line of malicious code. Nobody cracked a firewall. Nobody exploited a vulnerability. Nobody sent a phishing email with a corrupted attachment. They sent a resume, and then they showed up to a video interview, on time, dressed professionally, articulate in English, wearing a face that did not belong to them, answering questions from an AI chatbot running on a second screen just out of frame, routing their connection through a VPN in China to make their IP address look like suburban Florida. And it worked. Over and over and over again, CrowdStrike documented a 220% rise in successful infiltrations in 2025 alone. Over 320 American companies penetrated in 12 months. One investigator at CrowdStrike told Fortune that his team opens a brand new North Korean IT worker case every single day. The FBI issued a formal public advisory. They gave it a name, Code Red. This is how it works. From the beginning, to understand what is happening inside American companies right now, you need to go back about 15 years, to a decision Kim Jong Un made when he was still consolidating power after his father's death. North Korea is one of the most sanctioned nations on Earth. No foreign investment, no access to the international banking system, no ability to sell its natural resources on the open market. The regime needed hard currency, dollars, euros, cryptocurrency, and it needed a way to generate it that did not depend on anyone letting them in. Kim Jong Un grew up in the digital age. His father did not. Starting in the early 2010s, North Korea began identifying its most mathematically gifted students and routing them into elite technical schools in and around Pyongyang. The curriculum was not theoretical, it was operational. Computer science, software engineering, full-stack web development, the languages and frameworks that Western tech companies post in their job listings, Python, React, Node.js, Solidity for blockchain, GitHub workflows, agile methodology, how to write a resume that passes an automated screening system. The graduates of these programs are genuinely skilled. That is not a small detail. They are not writing bad code and hoping nobody notices. Companies that hired them, before discovering what they were, described their work as competent, reliable, delivered on time. Some were promoted. When training is complete, they are deployed. Not to Pyongyang server rooms, physically deployed, in teams of 4 or 5, flown to China, Russia, Nigeria, Cambodia, Laos, the United Arab Emirates. Given housing, given equipment, given a target, the Western job market, and a quota of salary to generate for the regime every month. Each operative receives a package. A stolen American identity with a real social security number, a real name, a real employment history assembled from LinkedIn profiles, data broker databases, and breach archives. A portfolio website built from a GitHub template, populated with fabricated client projects and testimonials. A resume engineered to mirror the specific language of job postings in their target sector. Researchers at the cybersecurity firm Nisos found candidate resumes that copied their job descriptions word for word, down to phrases specific enough that no independent writer would arrive at them naturally. They apply to hundreds of positions simultaneously, running multiple identities, tracking which personas have been rejected, which are in second-round interviews, which have received offers. Managed like a sales pipeline, because that is exactly what it is. But there is a structural problem with this entire operation. When a company hires a remote worker, they ship a laptop to a physical address in the United States. That laptop connects to the company's internal systems from a domestic IP address. It files W-2 forms. It appears in every way that a payroll system or an IT department can verify to belong to an American citizen working from an American home. The North Korean operative sitting in a room in Shenyang or Lagos cannot receive that laptop. They cannot provide a real American address. They needed someone on the ground. They found one in Arizona. Christina Chapman was 50 years old, living in Litchfield Park, a suburb of about 5,000 people 20 miles west of Phoenix. She had struggled financially for years. She posted videos on TikTok charting what she described as her rise from poverty. A new job, she said, in a computer business, international travel. Things were looking up. What she did not say on TikTok was that the computer business involved receiving company-issued laptops on behalf of people who did not exist, installing remote access software on them, and shipping them to addresses on the border of China and North Korea. She ran what investigators call a laptop farm. In her spare room, she built a system. Shelves of laptops, each one labeled with a sticky note. The name of the company that sent it, the name of the stolen American identity attached to it. A filing system for a crime that would eventually ensnare over 300 companies and 68 real American citizens whose identities had been taken without their knowledge. Her operation worked like this. A North Korean operative, somewhere in China or Southeast Asia, would apply for a remote IT position using a stolen American identity. When they received an offer, the company would ship a laptop to Chapman's house, to the address associated with the fake identity she had helped create. Chapman would receive the laptop, set up remote desktop software on it, and either hold it at her home or ship it onward. 49 devices went to overseas addresses, including multiple shipments to a city on the Chinese border with North Korea. The operative would then log in remotely from wherever they actually were, their traffic appearing to originate from a domestic American IP address, and begin working their new job. The salary would deposit into US bank accounts Chapman controlled. She would process payroll, file tax forms in the names of stolen identities, transfer funds overseas. She charged the North Koreans for this service $176,000 over 3 years, her personal fee, separate from the millions she laundered. A flat rate for destroying the financial identities of 68 Americans and opening the internal networks of 300 companies to a foreign government. At her peak, the operation had grown too large to run alone. She hired 2 assistants. The scheme ran from October 2020 to October 2023, 3 uninterrupted years, before the FBI executed a search warrant on her home and found the room full of labeled laptops. She had deleted 10 Skype conversations with her North Korean contacts the moment she learned the FBI was coming. It did not help. The laptop farm solved the infrastructure problem. But as the scheme scaled through 2023 and into 2024, a new problem emerged: video interviews. Most companies, by 2023, required at minimum 1 face-to-face video call before extending an offer. The North Korean operatives could handle the resume, they could handle the technical screening, written tests, coding challenges, GitHub repositories. But a live video call, where a hiring manager is looking at your face, creates a different kind of exposure. They solved this too. In June 2025, a cybersecurity company called Nisos posted a job opening for a senior AI architect role. They received an application within days. The candidate listed his name as Joe, Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, Florida Atlantic University, 10 years of experience. The resume was polished, comprehensive, and almost perfectly mirrored the language of Nisos's job posting. Nisos's investigators ran background checks before the first call. The LinkedIn account had been created in May 2025, 1 month before the application. Fewer than 5 connections. 3 different resumes existed for the same name, listing different universities and different employers, all of them tracing back to the real personal details of a man in Palm Beach Gardens who had never applied for a job at Nisos and had no idea his identity was being used. Nisos decided not to reject Joe. They decided to find out exactly what they were dealing with. Joe arrived at the video call on time, orange t-shirt, beige room visible behind him. He said he was in Palm Beach Gardens. He answered preliminary questions competently. Then Magan Gishinto, Nisos's chief people officer, asked a question that did not exist anywhere in any preparation material. I heard you guys had Hurricane George recently. How was your house? How was Palm Beach? There had been no hurricane. There had never been a hurricane named George. Jacinto had invented it 30 seconds before asking. Joe paused. His eyes moved off-screen to a second monitor, investigators believe, where he was running an AI chatbot to generate answers to questions he had not anticipated. How can I say, he said, looking away. Luckily, my place was fine. Minutes later, when asked to share his screen, he logged off the call entirely. Nisos had already shipped him a specially configured laptop to trace what happened next. They embedded canary tokens throughout, invisible digital tripwires that report back when accessed. The connection trail led through Astrill VPN, a service that cybersecurity researchers have specifically documented as popular among North Korean operatives routing traffic through China. Inside the returned laptop, investigators found a Raspberry Pi, a circuit board roughly the size of a credit card, wired to provide full remote keyboard, video, and mouse access. Whoever was on the other end of that connection could operate the machine exactly as if they were physically sitting in front of it, from anywhere in the world. The face itself was the final layer. Palo Alto Networks Unit 42 ran a controlled experiment. A single researcher, no prior image manipulation experience, a 5-year-old consumer laptop, created a convincing real-time deepfake identity in 70 minutes using freely available software. One face, mapped onto another in real time, indistinguishable on a standard video call to someone who did not know what artifacts to look for. CrowdStrike documented North Korean operatives purchasing premium subscriptions to deepfake face-swapping services specifically during active hiring operations. The same operator, wearing different synthetic faces, applying for the same position multiple times under different stolen identities, running the odds like a lottery until one persona got through. The face on your screen during a video call has not been reliable proof of identity for some time now. Most companies do not know this yet. Getting hired is not the end of the operation. In some ways, it is just the beginning. Once embedded inside a company's network with legitimate employee credentials, North Korean IT workers do exactly what they were hired to do. They write code, they attend stand-up meetings, they submit pull requests that pass code review. They answer Slack messages promptly. For months, in some documented cases, years, they are functionally indistinguishable from the person on their stolen resume. Simultaneously, they are doing something else. They copy entire code repositories to personal cloud accounts and private GitHub profiles. Behavior that is not unusual among developers, which is precisely why it works as cover. They map internal system architecture. They harvest session cookies and credentials. They document the security posture of the company from the inside. All of this intelligence eventually routes back to North Korea's more advanced cyber units, the ones responsible for the $1.5 billion Bybit cryptocurrency heist in February 2025, among dozens of others. And when some of them are discovered, either through an internal audit, a security review, or an accidental exposure, they do not go quietly. They send emails. They threaten to release proprietary source code publicly unless paid. They demand ransom from the same companies that had been paying their salaries for months. Companies that spent a year believing they had a productive mid-level developer find themselves receiving extortion demands from the government of North Korea. The human cost runs in 2 directions simultaneously. The 68 Americans whose identities Christina Chapman stole woke up one day to discover that someone had been filing taxes in their name, collecting salaries in their name, accruing IRS records in their name for years. One of them, documented in Chapman's sentencing memo, applied for unemployment benefits during a period out of work. They were denied. The government's records showed they were currently employed, drawing a salary from a company they had never heard of. The unemployment agency had no way to know the employee was not real. The companies themselves spent millions on forensic audits after the fact, trying to determine what had been accessed, what had been copied, what had been exfiltrated during the months or years an operative had legitimate credentials. Some discovered stolen code, some are still auditing. The money that moved through Chapman's operation and through the dozens of other laptop farms the FBI identified across 16 states ultimately converged on the same destination. The United Nations estimates the full scheme generates between $250 million and $600 million annually for the North Korean regime. A White House official stated publicly in 2024 that approximately half of North Korea's missile development program is now funded through cyber attacks and cryptocurrency theft. The connection between an American developer's bi-weekly paycheck and a ballistic missile test in the Sea of Japan is not theoretical. It is documented, traced, and verified by federal prosecutors. Michael Barnhart, North Korea specialist at Mandiant, described the distinction this way. Most financial crime funds luxury consumption, yachts, real estate, cash. North Korea's IT worker scheme funds weapons capable of reaching the continental United States. A yacht versus a missile, he said. Attribution matters. On a morning in October 2023, FBI agents pulled up to a house in Litchfield Park, Arizona, with a search warrant. What they found inside the spare room stopped them. 90 laptops, organized on shelves, each one labeled with a handwritten sticky note identifying the company that had sent it and the stolen American identity attached to it. Color-coded, sorted. A bureaucratic system built for efficiency, for a crime that had been running for 3 uninterrupted years inside a suburban American home. Chapman had been so overwhelmed by the volume of work that she had hired 2 assistants to help her manage the operation. The scheme had scaled beyond what one person could administer alone. She was arrested, charged on 9 counts including conspiracy to commit wire fraud and aggravated identity theft, and ultimately pleaded guilty in February 2025. On July 24, 2025, U.S. District Court Judge Randolph Moss sentenced Christina Marie Chapman to 102 months in federal prison, 8.5 years. He ordered her to forfeit $284,000 that had been set aside for transfer to North Korea, and to pay an additional judgment of $176,000, the exact amount she had charged the operatives for her services. At the press conference following the sentencing, U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro did not soften her message to corporate America. North Korea is not just a threat to the homeland from afar. It is an enemy within. It is perpetrating fraud on American citizens, American companies, and American banks. Your tech sectors are being infiltrated by North Korea. And when big companies are lax and they are not doing their due diligence, they are putting America's security at risk. This is a code red. 2 months before Chapman's sentencing, in June 2025, the FBI conducted coordinated raids on 29 known and suspected laptop farms across 16 states, seizing 137 laptops. The Justice Department unsealed indictments against 4 actual North Korean nationals, Kim Kwang Jin, Kang Tae Bok, Jong Pong-ju, and Chang Nam-il, the first time federal prosecutors had directly charged the operatives themselves rather than only their American facilitators. All 4 remain at large. The alias Brian Cornelius, one of the identities tracked by investigators, was last documented in May 2025, actively applying for a position at a large American insurance company. Months after the raids, months after the indictments, months after the Code Red declaration. The investigator who has tracked Brian Cornelius across multiple platforms and job applications was asked whether the crackdown was working. For everyone we catch, for every laptop farm the FBI raids, it is whack-a-mole. There is no silver bullet. Chapman is in prison. The operatives she served are not. The training pipeline in Pyongyang that produced them is not. The demand inside American companies, created by remote work, by competitive hiring markets, by the structural impossibility of verifying identity over a video call, has not changed. The question the FBI keeps returning to is not whether this will happen to more companies. It is whether those companies will find out before or after the damage is done. There is a detail buried in the FBI's official public guidance that almost no coverage of this story mentions. North Korean IT workers have been formally documented using real-time AI chatbots to answer interview questions live during video calls. The operative reads the question, looks off-screen, waits for the chatbot to generate a plausible response, looks back, delivers the answer, the pause before the reply, the eyes moving slightly off-center, the phrase, "How can I say," while the answer loads. These are visible, they are detectable. Most hiring managers conducting video interviews right now have never been told to look for them. The deepfake detection technique that currently works, asking a candidate to pass their hand in front of their face, which disrupts the facial tracking algorithm and causes visible artifacts, will not work indefinitely. The software improves continuously. A security researcher who documented the technique in early 2025 said publicly that he could spot every glitch in the current generation of tools. He was not reassured by that. "I'm scared that in a year," he said, "I won't be able to decide if the person I'm talking with is a real person or not." 309 companies hired someone they could not verify, paid them for months or years, gave them internal access, credentials, the kind of embedded knowledge that takes time to acquire and longer to find once it walks out the door. The FBI has published its red flag list, resumes that mirror job descriptions too precisely, LinkedIn accounts created weeks before an application, candidates who look slightly off-camera during video calls, addresses for laptop delivery that don't match the resume, a reluctance to turn the camera on at all. These are not sophisticated tells, they are observable by anyone paying attention. The question is not whether your company could be targeted. 309 companies were targeted, and the infiltrations rose 220% in a single year, despite every public warning, every indictment, every laptop farm the FBI dismantled. Think about the last remote hire your team made, the video call, the resume, the GitHub profile, the references you called. What would you have done differently? Drop that in the comments. Because the people making those hiring decisions right now are asking themselves the same question. And the FBI's answer is that most of them still do not have one.